welcome back to The Word Now. This is Pastor Mark Goody. Looking forward to spending a few minutes with you. Today we are starting session number 8, and I want to consider a very important subject for the Christian, the subject of the resurrection. So I guess if we are to ask a question, we could say, did the resurrection happen? Was the resurrection of Jesus Christ real? And that's a very important question for this reason, and it is that the very crux of Christianity and the historical foundation of Christianity rests upon the credibility of the person of Jesus Christ. We could call him its founder, the founder of Christianity, God's Son, Jesus Christ. But the credibility of Christ very much rests upon the fact and the historical fact of this resurrection. All right, so it's a very important subject. Did the resurrection happen? Now, as we speak about the resurrection of Jesus Christ, in this particular session, I don't so much want to speak about the spiritual implications of that. That is for another day. I want to really speak more about the historicity and the fact of this event, the resurrection. Okay, it's important because, as I mentioned, it really gives the ultimate authenticity to not only the person of Jesus Christ, but also Christianity. The authenticity of Christianity is that it wasn't just concocted in some room with some man that had a vision, that really its foundations are found in the historical reality of events that have been measured by mankind and have been witnessed in time and space, and that includes the resurrection. Its importance is also seen in the fact that it is so vehemently contested, that it is so opposed that false religion and the kingdom of darkness as well does all to discredit the fact of the resurrection. And that alone shows how important it is. They will say ridiculous arguments to disannul the fact of the resurrection. And some of them are sort of laughable, except the fact that people believe them. So they're very serious. All right, what are some of the... firstly, let's think about the some historical considerations. Because when we delve into history, we can't just look at history from the 21st century perspective. We must go back in the context and see the effect of events in the time frame that we are speaking about. So what is the context of the resurrection of Jesus Christ? Well, the timing is that it was the 1st century AD, so that's nearly 2,000 years ago. It was the Roman occupation of Palestine as the Romans dominated Europe, and they also went a little bit into the Middle East, and they invaded Palestine, what we now call Palestine, although it was really Israel. In terms of the cultural ethos, well, spiritually or religiously, we could say that the Jewish religion still ruled, and within that we had the prominence of these Jewish groups such as the Pharisees and the Sadducees, and all these people that had a spiritual or religious voice in that day. We see the new arrival of a Christian movement, those that had witnessed the person of Jesus Christ and were now beginning to follow him. And of course, that wasn't a great following at this time. It was notably the 12 disciples, but also many had seen the miracles and had seen the life of Jesus Christ, heard his amazing words, and were now following him. And we see the emergence of this new faith, the Christian faith. And of course, this was a great threat to Rome, because they saw it as a challenge to Caesar. They saw it as a rebellious challenge that needed to be quashed and stopped in case it rose up and challenged Caesar himself. Okay. What else were some of the forces at work as we consider the resurrection? Well, some of the attitudes and some of the forces. Number one, the Romans themselves wanted to shut down Christianity, and they would do all to persecute it, and later on those persecutions would be very severe. In the 10 Roman persecutions that involved in many Christians dying and suffering. The religious people of that day, they were proud and they were religious, and they also saw this new faith Christianity as a threat. They saw that it threatened their tradition. The big word there is their tradition, the traditions of the Jewish faith. Some were biblical, but many were added on. And so even during the short 3.5 year earthly public ministry of Jesus Christ, we saw great opposition from the religious establishment, who viewed Christianity as almost a cultic belief, and certainly something that challenged the traditions and the religion that they had promoted, especially the Pharisees. We saw the backdrop is also the disciples who they had no expectation of a resurrection, and they were pretty much defeated because the leader that they had followed had been crucified. So almost at the beginning of their newfound faith, it was shut down as they saw it. They were really crushed. We're not expecting a resurrection, and we're not expecting. We're sort of considering that their faith had come to an end, really. Okay, what would provide another explanation to the resurrection? So the Christian faith has built upon the physical reality of the resurrection from the dead of the person and the body of Jesus Christ. So what other explanations are there available apart from the resurrection? Well, firstly, there would be the presentation of a dead body. If a dead body had been presented, the body of Jesus Christ, then that would shut the mouth of all those that proclaimed the resurrection. Of course, there was never a dead body found. Number two, if a credible answer could be given to the empty tomb. And even though men have struggled for these many years, there's no credible answer to the fact of the empty tomb. So if we could find a credible answer, we could say that the resurrection didn't happen. But there is no credible answer. Number three, we can discredit the historicity, and this is what some of the other religions who challenge the resurrection, they do all to discredit the historicity. But of course, the error there is that it doesn't. These things don't agree with the history. The history has eyewitnesses. The history has facts which lead to belief in a resurrection. So a shabby attempt to do away with the resurrection is to discredit the history, but it's not a valid attempt, because you can't change the facts of human history. All right, so let's have some theological considerations. Let's think of a few theological considerations. Remember, we're speaking about the historicity, the fact of the resurrection. The question I'm asking is, did it happen? In our theological considerations, number one, it was prophesied, particularly in such places as Psalm 16, which speaks of the resurrection, but more importantly, in the very life of Jesus Christ. Those years before the event, he went around on many occasions and said, I will be crucified, but on the third day I will rise from the dead. This was spoken of in those years before, especially the last year before he was crucified. So there was a prophetic expectation. Number two, there is no answer to the empty tomb. There's no answer. How did the tomb become empty? I mean, it was guarded by Roman soldiers. It had a great stone upon it. When we delve into the historicity, there is no answer to the fact of the empty tomb. Who could have taken the body of Jesus Christ if he was indeed dead and someone stole the body? How did they get past the Roman soldiers? How did they move the stone? And there's another more important fact than the empty tomb, because the empty tomb is only half of the story of the resurrection. This is the second half of the story of the resurrection. And it was that Jesus Christ appeared. That Jesus didn't just appear quickly and said, I'm resurrected, here I am, guys, and then he hid away. Let's be realistic. We have the historical testimony. We have 1 Corinthians chapter 15 in the Bible. We have other testimonies of the resurrection. But the fact is that the living Christ that had been crucified, the one that had been slaughtered before the eyes of men and under the hand of a Roman centurion and a Roman process, this one is now not only alive, but he's alive and seen alive over a period of 40 days. That's 1.5 months. And he appeared to all the different groups at different times. We see them listed in 1 Corinthians chapter 15. He even appeared to 500 people at one time. He appeared before his enemies. What does it mean, appeared? Did he have all wounds? Was he limping around as someone that had almost been dead but now had come back to life? No. He was in full and perfect health. He was in full and perfect health. He went about and he showed Thomas in John chapter 20, the wounds in his hands and the wounds in his side. He didn't show Thomas gaping, bleeding wounds that were infected. He showed Thomas healed wounds which were attached to a body that was in perfect health. I just want to mention one historical testimony of the resurrection. This is not a biblical account. This is by Tertullian, just to throw this in. Tertullian, he was a 1st century writer. And this is what he said. He said, the fame of our Lord's remarkable resurrection and ascension being now spread abroad, Pontius Pilate, according to an ancient custom of communication, moved occurrences to the emperor that nothing might escape him. He transmitted to Tiberius, emperor of Rome, an account of the resurrection of our Lord from the dead. Tiberius referred the whole matter to the Senate, who, being unacquainted with the facts, rejected it. But the point is that the Roman authority on the scene, Pontius Pilate, so that he could make his superiors know about this momentous fact, the fact that was creating a great stir in Palestine, he wrote to the Emperor Tiberius of the resurrection. So it was well known at that time. And let's just remember, the historical backdrop is this. Think about this. If the Romans could find the body of Jesus Christ, they would gladly do so, because that would put to death the growth of this new religion and this new faith. They didn't produce a body. If the religious crowd and the Pharisees could produce a dead body and the body of Jesus Christ, they would gladly do so in the historical context, because that would shut the mouth of all of the Christians, and that would shut down the emergence of Christianity. But they couldn't find the dead body. It must be remembered that it was this event, some might say that the disciples stole the body and they propagated this lie of the resurrection. Well, if we look at the further life of those disciples, we see that these 11 weak men, and then later on the Apostle Paul, were immediately changed. They saw this risen Christ, those on the road to Emmaus in Luke chapter 24. And what they saw and the resurrected Christ that they saw over a period of 40 days changed them, that they went about shouting about the resurrection. And they were so convinced that they allowed their life to go to death. They died gruesome deaths because of their belief in the resurrection. Now, it does stand to reason that if they made up a story, at least one of them would have cracked to preserve his own life and said, no, it's all a big lie. But none of them did, because they were changed men. Their fear was changed into boldness. And that boldness led them to death when even Peter was crucified upside down, because they were so convinced of what they had seen as eyewitnesses of the resurrected Christ, who had gone about for 40 days and they had seen him. So these are some of the realities. And of course, there's another reality, is that a dead body, and that's the person of Jesus Christ who was crucified on the cross and seen as being dead by the Roman soldiers and by the witnesses. You know, the biological laws say that dead body cannot come to life. We cannot do that. Even today in the modern world, we cannot resurrect a dead body. It was clearly a supernatural event. It followed a prophetic expectation. It went against the laws of science, as a dead body became a living body. It went against the contextual laws of the scene, which included the Roman soldiers and the effect on the disciples and all these things. And at the end of the day, when we delve into the historicity, there is no answer except the fact that Jesus truly rose from the dead. You know, the clothing was found in its place. The napkin was found in its place. That the dead body rose and went through the tomb and left the clothing behind. And it supernaturally went through the physical tomb to appear as a human body and left those grave clothes in the tomb. Now, all right, so let's just consider this. We need to finish. What are some of the ramifications? What are some of the consequences of the resurrection? Number one, God is in Christianity. The fact that Christ rose from the dead shows the hand of God, that God is in this. God is in it. This is the true religion. It's authenticated by the God that raised his Son from the dead. Number two, Jesus is indeed the Christ. In Romans 1, 3 and 4, we have the acknowledgement that it's the resurrection that authenticated the identity of Christ. If Christ, who always claimed to be God, rose from the dead, and then that identity is verified. He is truly the Christ. Jesus Christ, God's Son. Number three, we have a solid foundation for our faith as Christians. It's not just a man that comes out of a cave and says, I've had a vision, follow me. The Christian faith is built upon historical events that can be measured in the normal measures of history in time and space. Number four, it gives ultimate credibility. This gives the credit. This is why Christianity and the person of Jesus Christ are different than all the others. They don't rest on the words of a man. They don't rest on a man that came out of his vision and said, oh, this is it. They rest upon historical fulfillment of prophecy and of a risen Christ who was seen in time and space. And then the last consequence of the resurrection is, of course, this. It means that all the others are counterfeit. It means that all the others that claim to be the true religion, if you follow these laws, you go to heaven, and if you do this meditation, you go to your heaven. It means that it shows clearly that all those are counterfeit deceivers. And of course, this isn't a surprise, because the kingdom of darkness gladly will raise up religion to trick men into believing the wrong thing. Of course, the kingdom of darkness is real. We're in a spiritual battle. But it's the resurrection that not only authenticates the person of Christ and the Christian faith, but it also reveals that all others are counterfeit. So, of course, I could say a lot more, and I want to remind you that there are these men that set forth to disannul the resurrection. There are such names as Josh McDowell and Lee Strobel, and these were lawyers, and these were men that were highly acclaimed, really academic men, that said, we're going to disprove this resurrection and show that it's one great lie. And of course, as they, in their scientific and also judicial methods, delved into the facts of the resurrection, you know what? They saw that it wasn't a lie. And they became believers because they saw there was no answer to the empty tomb. There was no answer to the eyewitness accounts of the risen Christ than the reality that he had risen from the dead. Lee Strobel and Josh McDowell and many others. All right, so I'm going to finish there. If you want to know more, please look into my books. I've written about the resurrection. I've written about the historicity and some of the historical documents in historical eyewitnesses, and especially in apologia. So this is Pastor Mark Goody ending this session number, I think it's 8, the historical reality of the resurrection. Did Christ rise from the dead? All right, so wherever you are, and whenever you are, if it's the morning or the daytime or the evening or the nighttime, may God's speed be with you, and may the living and true God be in your life and really leading you in his eternal and precious plan. So Godspeed, goodbye.